Well, thanks so much for spending your valuable time with us here today. This is going to be a really fun episode. I'm looking forward to it on a subject that some people get a little intimidated by. And we're going to be chatting with Christina Lenkowski about negotiating a new approach to PR so that you can turbocharge your connections and your credibility. So, welcome, Christina. I'm looking forward to it.
Cindy, I am so excited to be here talking to your audience. I was telling you I've been go, go, go. I was listening to one of your episodes earlier today, and it got me really pumped up to be here today and talking to the folks that I know need to hear about kind of this new and different way of getting in front of their audience.
Absolutely. And I love that you say a new and different way, because for our listeners, if you don't happen to know Christina, she's a very forward thinking publicist and also an educator for professionals, for entrepreneurs, for speakers, for authors, you name it. And basically anybody out there looking to expand their credibility to go from, sometimes you feel like a best kept secret to go from that to the go-to expert in your particular area. So after 13 years of working in PR, Christina had discovered her sort of secret sauce, which we're going to dig into. And since 2019, she's been dedicated her work to helping business owners see the same kind of results that she's been able to achieve. So tell me, Christine, how did you come to this kind of work?
This is such a great question, but really what it came down to is, like you mentioned, I worked for PR in agencies and in-house, marketing, PR, et cetera, for all kinds of businesses, kind of doing more traditional PR. So your print, your TV, radio, et cetera. And I went off after I had my daughter and I was like, I did what a lot of people out there may have done as well. And I was like, I'm going to start a course.
Yeah.
I'm going to start a course and it's going to make me $1 million in my sleep and I'm not going to have to do anything. And this is the way that it's going to go.
Yeah.
And if you can't see me and Cindy right now, just know we're kind of laughing at that but I was like, I had drank the Kool-Aid. I was like, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I had a young, I was like, this is it. And so at that time, what was being taught in regards to selling your courses was to put a bunch of money into ads, to have that go to a webinar, and then to have that go to kind of email sales. And so I did that exact funnel and sold virtually nothing. And I remember yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, guys, we have like all been there. But I remember at the time, my husband, he was like, so what are we doing here? And I was like, shut up. You don't know what I'm doing, whatever. I was like, I'm building an empire, or whatever. But
Yeah.
what I did after that, which again, I think a lot of people can kind of relate to, is I tapped back into my intuition.
Yeah.
And I was like, you are teaching a course on publicity, and yet you are doing no
Yeah.
publicity to promote this course. And so I took all that experience that I had and I started to pitch myself to podcasts. And at that point, this is 2018, 2019, podcasts they were becoming more of a thing, but they were not what they are today as a part of our everyday life. And I got myself booked on these shows and it was night and day in my business. People reaching out to me to see about consulting, asking me to come speak, buying my course from all over the world. And I realized what a amazing opportunity this was for people to get in front of their ideal audiences and be really upping that know, like, and trust factor very organically.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny because, digging into that, I think a lot of people cringe about the prospect of managing marketing, right? And so I love that you offer not only a different option, but I'd love if you could share with our listeners, a different perspective on how to think about marketing to get rid of that kind of ick factor.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact of the matter is a lot of people are out here doing marketing, but not getting in front of any new people.
Yeah.
And so I want you to think about that and how you're doing that in
Yeah.
your business or in your life, et cetera. And the reason that I say that is I actually literally just had a discovery call with someone earlier today, and she was like, I'm really having a hard time on LinkedIn because I'm not growing my LinkedIn list at all, but I'm posting there 3 times a week, And I was like, that's not really going to grow your audience. Like, maybe some people that trickle in from that work, but social media is more, in my opinion, of a brand development. And what I mean by that is the people that know you can really get to know you a lot better, but it doesn't get you in front of new audiences, at least on a regular, consistent basis. And so you need to be thinking about what forms of marketing are going to get you in front of new audiences. Everything falls into owned, earned, or paid marketing. Okay. And the owned marketing is those social media channels. Even though you don't own the channel, you own what goes out into it. your own podcast, your own website, your email, etc., right? The paid is, in a shock to no one, what you pay for. So paid ads, maybe an influencer campaign, something like that. And then there's earned, and that's where publicity falls in. And that is where you are not paying any money. You are never paying to be a guest on a podcast. I will go off on that if someone asks me about that. But that is not what you are looking to do. You are looking to get in front of someone else's audience and provide value for their audience. And that's where that publicity comes into play. Okay. You are utilizing their platform and you are providing value to them. So I want you to get over this kind of ick factor of publicity or things like that, because really what it comes down to is a value add. And that is truly what you're doing to get in front of new audiences, because that's where so many business owners fall short.
Yeah. And I love that perspective shift, because I think marketing often gets a bad rap. And I know in law, like in some jurisdictions, including Canada for a long time, not anymore, but lawyers and law firms weren't even permitted to advertise. I don't know that that was ever the case in the US.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
think it's because it was considered sort of beneath the profession or something. And that's definitely no longer the case. But I think a
Yeah.
lot of professionals, a lot of lawyers I know, will resist marketing initiatives. So again, you sort of touched on it, but what do you have to say to our listeners who fall in that category? Like, what are the benefits of effective marketing for professionals and others out there?
I love this question because people that work in these professional services, like lawyers, like, they work in taxes, banking, etc., you have such an advantage using podcast guesting and being on podcasts as a big part of your marketing. And the reason why is you are going to up those know, like, and trust factors so incredibly dramatically. That is why we have seen our clients in these services have 5x ROI and above, because they are getting in front of their ideal audiences, who it is they want to talk to, talking about something that makes that person needs to hear or makes sense to them. Maybe that's a tax strategy, maybe that's talking about a law strategy, or maybe a particular law that they didn't know anything about, right, etc. But the fact of the matter is, people very rarely are going to book a call with a professional service when they don't know them, when they don't have a personal referral.
Yeah.
No one's going to talk about their legal issues or
Their most
questions, their
intimate
money.
conflicts.
They're not going to talk about their money. They're not going to talk about all these things with someone if they don't feel like they know them or they have some kind of connection to them. And so you are really opening up this whole trust thing with them when they have heard your voice, they have heard your thoughts on things, and they really feel connected to you. So honestly, like, you're in some of the best profession to be getting out there and talking to the audiences that need to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that you hit that hard, and I hope for our lawyers out there, you're listening to that, and any other professionals, frankly, or anybody. It's particularly in today's world where there's such a fear about scamming, and that take advantage of building a connection. And I know, Christina, you have like this unique approach to marketing using the, if I can call it conscientious podcast guest speaking as a tool to sort of pivot in your businesses. Talking about the conscientious part, how do you make sure, like if our listeners are going, but how do I get in front of the right audiences? What are some tips you have about that?
I have a couple tips for this. And kind of the first thing is ask your audience what they listen to. I am telling you right now that your audience listens to podcasts. I don't care what age they are. I don't care what gender they are. I don't care what. They are listening to podcasts. So a great place to start is to just ask your audience. That could be on an e-newsletter. That could be on on social media, whatever makes sense for you, to get that out there. But you will get some ideas of shows that your ideal customer is already listening to. Now, you're also going to get shows that make no sense for, what you do. A lot of my followers know that I'm a true crime aficionado and fan. If I'm suddenly pitching a client to true crime, things have gone horribly wrong. But but I also still get that data. But they give me a lot of really other great shows that do focus on those ideal audiences for me. So that's a really great, like, low level, kind of low hanging fruit thing that you can do to start getting some ideas of shows. Then the other thing that I want you to do is think about someone that has a similar ideal audience to you, or ideal customer, client, etc. to you. Okay. So think about them. They might be a competitor. They might not. They might just be someone in an adjacent, niche. They just have a certain person. I want you to drop their name into Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever and see what shows they've been on. Okay. This is a great jumping off point for you because A, you could be pitching yourself to the same shows. You just need to pitch with a different idea. But beyond that, what I want you to do is scroll down to the bottom to this you might also like, or people
Yeah.
that listen to this show also listen to XYZ. And that's where you're going to really start getting into the research. I will give you a word of warning. I have to set an alarm when I do this because I could go down the rabbit hole of podcasts for hours. For hours, you guys, there's over 1 million podcasts. There's a ton, a ton that are there. But give yourself some time to be able to go through, or even have a member of your staff do that, right? And go through, find some shows that really seem like they could be the good fit. The more niche, the better.
Yeah.
Meaning, I'm thinking about one of our clients who's a tax accountant, bookkeeper, multi 7-figure agency that she runs. And she really loves speaking to people in the hair and beauty industry. Okay. That doesn't mean that that's what all her clients are, not at all. But she was a hairdresser before she went into her line of work and kind of became all this. So she loves and absolutely like bonds with that audience a lot because she can talk about what specifically is important to them. And the reason that I say this is when she goes on that shows, man, the return for her is amazing. Discovery calls, new leads that do turn into clients. And a lot of times that's because they haven't heard, they don't know who to trust.
Yeah.
They know who's going to understand what my business is, who's going to understand what my industry is, right? And so she is able to speak to them on that. But again, the beauty is that's not the only client she services. That just happens to be a particular area of like personal connection for her.
Yeah. Well, and I want to really put a pin in that for our listeners, because I think for so many people, it's counterintuitive. And so I want you to shake up your preconceptions about that, because I think we all think, oh, I want to get in front of as many people. The broader the audience, the more general the audience, the better. But the more you try and appeal to everybody, chances are you're going to appeal to nobody. So find those niches. They say the riches are in the niches. It's, I'm pronouncing niches wrong, but that's all right.
We all know what we're saying either way, And I love that you brought that up because I say this to people all the time. People come to me and they're like, well, I want to be on this big show or this big show, and I'm like, we can always go after those shows. Absolutely. But the fact of the matter is we've gotten our clients booked on some big podcasts. And while that's great for credibility building, for visibility, and things like that, when it comes to making money, getting the ROI on this work, it is the smaller, more focused shows. That is where those leads really come from, as opposed to these big audiences where some people might be interested, but some really aren't.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that gets often overlooked, and a lot of PR goes the other way because everybody wants like, oh, I want the big name, I want the big whatever. And it's a lot of glitz and a lot of whatever. But as you say, you don't get the nuts and bolts money, you don't get the business, you don't get the growth. Now, I'm a big believer, as you probably know, the art of feminine negotiation in particular, about the power of connections and community and relationships. And, I think we've discounted that for so long, defining success based on these very competitive models. So tell us how your approach fits with that. This podcast guesting seems to me to be such a natural fit with those.
It absolutely is a natural fit with those. And I think one of the key things that people overlook with this strategy of marketing is your relationships with the hosts of the shows that you are on. Okay. And I want to dive into this a little bit because people think, just like we were talking about, people think, I just want to get in front of the people, right? I just want to get on an episode and I want the people to hear me, and that's what I'm looking for. And by the way, I want that for you too. You know what I mean? But that is one piece of this strategy. Okay. That is one piece. The other pieces that fall into that we can get into, but one of the main things is that relationship that you now have with that host and what other opportunities that can open up for you. And actually the week that I have had this week can prove that to you. And that is that I spoke in 2 memberships this week for hosts whose show I was on, right? So I was on their show. We built a relationship. I asked them how I could give value to them as a thank you for having me on their shows. And they were like, well, I have memberships and I would love to have you come speak in them. Fantastic. So this week I spoke in two separate memberships. And by the way, those each booked, like there were discovery calls booked
Yeah.
on each of those opportunities. I also was on a podcast interview yesterday where I said the same thing to a host afterwards, and they invited me to speak in their membership in the new
Yeah.
year. So I think that it's so important to know that like that's a huge opportunity. And it doesn't necessarily have to be one way. I'm again providing value for them on their show, for their listeners. I'm doing all these things. And at the very least, I want to be able to say to them, hey, I know that you've put in all this work to have me on. Let's see how I can also be helping your audience and helping you. But that for a lot of my clients, I will say that is like their biggest revelation at the end of our time working together, because I coach a lot on this,
Yeah.
is like how we keep that host relationship strong. And some hosts you're going to, hit it off with more than others. And some it's going to make a more natural fit for you to do more things with them, etc. So I'm not saying where you're forcing it,
Yeah.
but keeping that relationship strong, because some of the hosts that I've worked with have become clients of mine. And also they have become great referral partners.
Yeah. Well, and it's in it because it goes back to that sort of getting away from that deep conditioning about seeing everybody as competitive. And also,
Yes.
we've defined success on this very driven to-do mentality. And for the lawyers who are listening, because I could speak to that, I really had to shift my mindset away from that as I grow sort of Women on Purpose and the Art of Feminine Negotiation. Because at first with my podcasting, it was all about get in, get the podcast done, sort of get out. And all of a sudden the light went off for me about I'm like, oh my God, you're all about relationship and
Yes.
building community. And then really something as simple as saying, hey, look, I'm going to review your book. And why don't you do the same?
Right.
Let's put them out there. Let's share within
Yeah.
a community and make such a difference. And I know you'd mentioned the word intuition earlier as well. And I'm a big believer in intuition. I know you're a believer in the power of intuition.
Yes.
Tell us how that can play a role in making more strategic business decisions.
I love this question. And I'll even take it a step further in regards to what I do, which is like, what is your intuition about how you connect with people?
Yeah.
And I think this is a really important question to ask. What is your natural inclination towards what you like to do and where you see people really connect with you? For some people, that's speaking, right? That's this type of thing. For some people, that's writing. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
think about what really is that natural thing for you. You intuitively are like, this is what people connect with me on, and then double down on that thing, right? Whatever that thing is. We spend so much, I mean, I know you know this, Cindy, but like the stuff we get taught that we have to do it this way, we have to do it that way, we have to do it this way. And I'm here to tell you, no, you don't. Like, it's just like that story of me with the course, promoting my course at the beginning. I followed all the steps and that didn't work. And when I tapped back into what I know I'm really good at, which is connecting with people with my voice and talking with people, that's where that shift happened in my business. So like, if you're thinking about what am I going to do in 2025 marketing wise, like if you're starting to strategize like on that, I want you to think about, what do you naturally like to do? What do I naturally enjoy doing? What do I really connect with people on? And one thing I want to say out here is I know that there are people that are listening to this right now. I know it. Y'all are introverts. You are thinking to yourself, there is no way that I would ever guess on a podcast like this chick is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even imagine this. And I want to say to you, yes, I am an extrovert. I love the people. I love the talking. I love etc. Almost all my clients are introverts. And I think that this is very important for y'all to hear, because truly, I am just having a one-on-one conversation right now.
Yeah.
I'm not in front of a big group of people.
Yeah.
I'm talking to a big group of people. I'm having a one-on-one conversation with Cindy right now.
Yeah.
And I think that is so important for people to realize, and it kind of switches something in their mind of like, oh, I like to have conversations with people. Oh, I love to have a conversation with someone. And it's like, exactly.
Yeah.
So it happens to be that this conversation is going to be recorded and then play, and other people are going to listen into it later on, after it's edited and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But that's where I really see that intuition coming into play for people, because you will be so much more successful with your marketing when you enjoy doing it.
Well, and thank you for the reminder about introverts, because we are such an extrovert driven society right now with look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yes.
and I think often introverts feel they don't have something to bring to the table in that kind of
Yes.
environment. And ironically, a lot of the work I've done in negotiation, introverts make the best negotiators for a whole
I
host of
also
reasons,
I
right?
truly do think they make amazing podcast guests too, because they tend to be more insightful. They
Yes.
tend to really, again, get in on that conversation. I like how I'm like bashing myself in this conversation, but I do think that they really tend to get in there. And I do think it's important to remember, like, introverts absolutely can be marketers, and they can be marketers with their voice. And this is a really good way for them to do that in a way that feels safe.
Yeah, and they listen and they put themselves in the shoes of others, which actually puts them at a huge advantage, I think. So,
Yes.
and if
Yes.
you wondered why I was laughing, I was busting a gut when you were talking about that, put the way that doing it the way everybody tells you. Oh my
Yes.
God, a full, transparency here. When I first shifted from sort of the law to the negotiation piece and the women on purpose, and I was doing everything that all the leaders, most of whom were men, frankly, were talking, and it's like all that push energy, right? Push more emails, push your sales, push your this. You got to have, your lead magnet that goes to your funnel, that goes to the, and I hated all of it. And finally,
Yeah.
one day I woke up and went, what the hell am I doing here? What
Yeah.
of this do I love? And
Yeah.
let me embrace that. So I'm so glad you
I
mentioned.
love that.
So now let's talk about mindset for a moment, because I always say that's our first and most important negotiation. And
Is.
I think for a lot of people, you talked about introverts, but even generally, I think the thought of stepping out into the spotlight can be really intimidating for people. So, what are some tips you have for sort of negotiating our most powerful mindset, if you will, to overcome whether it's that pesky imposter syndrome or whatever limiting beliefs are holding us back?
You absolutely hit the nail on the head. This is a big thing for a lot of people when it comes to using their voice, particularly women.
Yeah.
Women really struggle sometimes with feeling worthy enough of being the voice that's out there. And so there's a couple things that I want to say to that. First of all, you are absolutely worthy. Everyone that's listening to this podcast, every single person, you have the expertise. People do want to hear from you. So I think it's really important to say that. But sometimes I'll ask people, what do you think is the worst thing that can happen? Like
Yeah.
by you listening on a podcast, like what do you think is the worst thing?
Yeah.
And I'll get a mix of answers, and sometimes that answer will be, well, what if I mess up what I'm saying? Okay. And I'm here to tell you 99.9% of the shows you ever do are not live.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I mean by that is they are pre-recorded. I can always say to a host, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't answer that question right. Do you mind asking me that again? And I'm going to start from the top.
Yeah.
Never, ever has that been an issue with a host that I have ever been with, that any of my clients have ever been with, etc. They are also trying to put out the absolute best show they possibly can. So it is not an issue to edit out a little bit and to have you start again. Okay. So I just want to be clear on that. And also, by the way, humans like to hear from other authentic
I
humans.
was just going to say that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. It's like, so you accidentally slip up, you accidentally say something, a little bit wrong. For me, I accidentally swear all the time. That's my big issue. That is the thing that I will put in there. But it's real.
Yeah.
And so unless that show is specifically doesn't want that in there, which is completely fine, but otherwise I'd be like, just leave it in. That's how I actually am. That's how I actually talk. And that's what people are going to relate to. In a world of AI, in a world of people not knowing what is real, they
Yeah.
don't want to hear you as a robot.
Yeah.
They want to hear you as a real person having an actual conversation.
And I think
So
people don't want slick, polished, finished.
yes,
I think, and I mean, not daring to go into the political sphere, but I will say,
yeah,
even simply look at politics. The more they flub, the more people relate to them. There's that connection. So definitely
yeah,
don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I love that
yeah.
answer.
Don't be yourself, but don't be afraid to do that. So that's a big thing that people feel. There's a lot of other stuff that people comes up for people. Again, like you talked about, what if I'm not that, I can think of three other people who would be better to talk about this than me. Well, who cares? They're not the ones pitching the show. Okay. You're the one that's pitching the show. You're the one that's going to get out there. Okay. So I think sometimes people think publicity is like, you know what, Cindy, this is a good analogy for this. I used to think that like award shows, like the Oscars or the Emmys or things like that. I thought someone just recognized that someone did a really great job and gave them an award. Like they were like, you know what? You crushed that. Like, here's your Oscar. You know what I mean? And come to find out, probably way too old, like way older than like you should be when you find this out. No, it's actually that these people have applied for
Yeah.
this award. And then they are judged for said award by a big panel of people, right? And then someone gets that award. And I need you to think about that for publicity too.
That's a great.
Things don't just fall in our laps.
Yes.
People don't just say, "You're doing a great job. You know what? Would you like to come on my podcast?" That'll happen every now and again. Don't get me wrong, at least hopefully.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have this be an actual marketing strategy, you need to be doing it consistently.
Yeah.
And in order to be consistently guesting on podcasts, you have to be pitching yourself to these opportunities.
Yeah.
They are going to then take a look at it, decide who makes the most sense. You're going to send them the best pitch you possibly can, and then it's going to go from there. So I don't want you sitting there. That I talk to people a lot who are like, "Well, I would love to guest, but no one's asked me." They're not gonna.
Yeah.
They're not gonna. Okay.
Yeah.
You need to be pitching yourself to these
Yeah.
opportunities or having someone pitch on your behalf to where these opportunities are coming to you. So that's another thing that I like to say there. And then finally, the last thing I'll say about this is, I ask people, what do you think is the worst thing that can happen? I truly believe the worst thing is that you do not put yourself out there. Your business.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. Your business will not grow if you are not getting in front of new people. And that is just the fact of the matter. I have people come to me regularly on calls, on a discovery call or something, and they're like, "I have built my business based on referrals. I'm really good at what I do, etc. But those wells have dried up. I'm not getting the referrals that I used to be getting, or at least they're not coming on a regular basis, etc., etc." And this is across any industry.
Yeah.
Okay. Like this is across any industry. And they realize that they need to be doing this type of marketing.
Yeah.
They realize that they need to be getting in front of more of their audiences.
Yeah.
And so that is what you need to be doing. And so again, the worst thing that can happen is you just don't even try and don't even put yourself out there.
Well, it's such a great message. And I would say across the board and particularly for women, as we talked about, because
Yes.
I love your awards analogy. And it's particularly apt because not only is it a great analogy, but not only put yourself out there pitching for podcasts, but put yourself out there for awards. Like, don't be shy about that, or ask somebody to nominate you for an award. Like, you're right. It doesn't just fall in your lap. The people who get it are people who are out there promoting themselves. Now, speaking of promoting, I'd love your thoughts on doing marketing ourselves versus hiring a publicist. What do you say about that?
I really think it comes down to the time that you have available. Our clients that work with us are busy business owners, and they simply do not have there's kind of a couple reasons, but one is they really don't have the time. And so they're very much like, I have the time to do the actual podcast interviews. Like, I'm willing to set aside that hour to do that. But I do not have the time to be doing this research, the pitching, the follow-up, the scheduling, right, et cetera. And then what also comes from that is they don't have a team member that's skilled or know how to really do that, right? One of our clients, she actually did an episode on a really big podcast talking about her case study specifically on podcast publicity and guesting. And she was like, "Look, I went through phases where I was like, I'm just going to try to see if a team member can do this, right? Like, I'm just going to see if a team member can pitch on my behalf and get it done." And the fact of the matter is, it kept getting pushed to the back burner because it wasn't their number one priority. It's not what they are trained knowing how to do. And the other fact of the matter is, we worked with almost 1,000 podcasts. So we have amazing, like someone like us has amazing connections in that way and is able to look at things from a bigger lens and perspective than you might be able to yourself.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, if you're just getting started, and if you also just, have the time at this ability to be able to do it, you can absolutely be pitching yourself to podcasts or to other opportunities as well.
Love that. And what are some signs that we could be looking for to know that we're ready? We're at that stage, like, hey, here's the big thing, neon sign that I maybe ought to be looking for a publicist at this stage. What would you say?
I think the big things to think about are you really clear on who your ideal audience or audiences are, or like who that client is that you're trying to get in front of, making, again, that might be multiple different avatars, or different things that you have for your clients, but you're clear on what those are, right? You're like, okay, I know that like these are the main areas that I really want to get in front of. We handle coming up with the topic ideas. We handle coming up with all that stuff. So that's not really something that you necessarily need to come, you don't need to come to someone like an agency with, but you do need to know who you're looking to get in front of and what it is you're driving them to. Like what is that service, that product, etc., that you're trying to get them, to become a client of yours with. And that could be just like a simple, that could be like a retainer,
Yeah.
if that's something like if you're a lawyer and you want to have a retainer there, if that's more of a project-based thing, that's great. If you're like, hey, I want to do more trainings, I want to do more, anything like that. It's just knowing what it is that you're kind of trying to get to on the back end, what kind of that ultimate goal is.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great answer. And now we've talked a couple of times, sort of as we're covering all the bases here today.
I love it.
And we both,
it's a real conversation. This is an AI. We're having a real conversation here. Yeah.
that we're getting double the value, if not triple,
Yes.
everybody here. We sort of throwing out ideas about success and how we've been conditioned to define it. I'd be curious, Christina, how do you define success?
Freedom.
No,
Freedom to me is the ultimate.
in there. I love that.
Yeah, freedom to me is the ultimate success. Having the ability to, just this morning, have the ability to be the one that takes my daughter to her PT, on Friday mornings and then takes her to school and then starts work, at 10:30, 11 o'clock on Friday because I'm doing that in the morning, but not having to stress about that. That's just built into my schedule. For me, that freedom, I'm married to someone who works in a corporate environment, and seeing that difference is huge. So knowing that I have that ability and working towards that, and also as a part of that, being okay with setting boundaries is a big part of, again, to me, what I consider success.
Yeah, I love it. Again, great answer. And I mean, tied to that, I get the freedom includes doing something you love. Like whether in the practice of law, I saw so many people following traditional paths when they would have been better, as we said, niche down to something that you love. And, or if you're want to be an influencer or a thought leader out there, don't just put out what you think might be popular. Focus in on something that fills you up, that you love. I think that's freedom, right? I love that. Yeah, my gosh, this has been just a whirlwind. I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? Again, it doesn't have to be about this topic at all, just one of those aha moments where you think differently, show up differently.
I think this is going to resonate with probably a lot of people in your audience, and that is progress over perfection. I think that it is so important. It was a big shift for me to understand everything doesn't need to be perfect to put something out into the world, and understand that it's going to change. Knowing that going into it, knowing that I'm going to put this out here, I'm going to see how it goes, but I also understand that a year from now, this thing is going to look different than it does today. I'm going to have a lot more insight. I'm going to have a lot more experience. If you're on my team, there's going to be a lot more systems around it, et cetera. So really, that was a huge shift for me to be like, I don't need to have the thing perfect before I get it out there. I just need to get it out there because I think that stifles a lot of people.
Absolutely. It is that, what do they call it? Paralysis of analysis or whatever.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that happens a lot with, that'll happen with podcast guesting. You'll get really too caught up in, well, am I going to send the perfect pitch? Am I going to be the perfect guest? Am I going to do whatever? And I am also here to tell you, you are going to sweat and stutter your way through your first couple interviews. Okay. Like everybody does. It is a muscle. It is a muscle. It is something you got to just keep doing, and you're going to get better and better and better over time. But absolutely, that analysis paralysis can come in. This perfectionism can come in. And I'm here to say, you just got to get started, and it's going to get so much better as you go along.
I love that. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking back, and for our listeners, just be okay with it when it's out there. Like, I think back when I first started, and I assume because I did a lot of public speaking, even in my legal career, and a fire and brimstone get up.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But videos were different, right? So when my first video, I thought this is going to be a piece of cake. And then you're sitting looking at yourself, or you're doing those videos. And in hindsight, oh my God, Christina, I look back at some of the earlier ones and I'm like, oh, stiff. And I am mortified. But you know what? At least they were out there, and I am okay with that, right? And I grew from it. So that's great advice.
And it was just doing it again and again and again that makes us so much better. I was actually I live in Boise, Idaho, and that is the home of Kit or ConvertKit. If people are familiar with them, they're an email service provider. and they built this beautiful podcast studio in downtown Boise that any KIT member has access to. But they did an event last night. They did like a networking event. And so I went and they were like, hey, you guys can record some clips in the studios, if you want. And me and one of my buddies went in there, and it was like we were so awkward because we were like in front of all these cameras and like professional equipment and like all this stuff. And so I'm here to tell you, I've been on like 75 plus podcasts personally, but it felt weird to be in like a studio doing like some recordings. You know what I mean? But I did it. And so I think that that's exactly it. It's like, feel uncomfortable and go for it anyways. Know that you're going to be uncomfortable, but like just get it done.
Yeah. And be yourself, right? So, So where can people learn more about you, Christina? I'm sure you've piqued the interest of most of our listeners here going, hey, I need to find out more about this. Where do you want me to send them?
I would love to have y'all go to publicitypodcast.com. And that is a free 6-part publicity series I did that talks about our whole process for getting our clients booked. So whether you're looking to pitch yourself or whether you're thinking about potentially having us or another agency pitch on your behalf, it'll give you a lot of great insights into kind of how that works and how that really looks.
Generous. I love that. So, and for our listeners, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And I encourage you, take advantage. When somebody offers you resources, go check them out.
Exactly. We got them there for a reason. I want you to be able to learn, want you to be able to kind of know what this is like, and you get to hear this voice for, another 6 episodes. So you're welcome.
Nice. How could you ever get tired of that? Well, Christina, thank you so much. This has been so informative. I find sometimes people are wanting to just sort of sell the product to get at the end, and you've given great value. It's been a great conversation. So thank you. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
And for our listeners, as I say, if you feel you didn't get value from this episode, then you need to listen again because it was jam-packed with gems dropping from the ceiling. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that. And as always, I invite you, give the gift of sharing. Share this episode with other people in your life who could benefit from getting higher visibility to be able to get their messaging out there to excel in their profession. And before we sign off, just speaking of for self-promotion, want to share some ways we can work together if you're looking to up-level your negotiation skills and recognize that all of life is a negotiation. Check it out. I've got everything from online to group to my signature mastermind or VIP experiences to help you better leverage your innate power to get more of what you want and deserve in this life because it goes by quickly. If that sounds interesting, check it out at artoffemininenegotiation.com. Make sure to grab a copy of my book as well if you haven't done that yet, of the same name, Art of Feminine Negotiation. And that is a wrap for this episode. Until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.